let's kick this off today. Hypergraph 49, I think that's correct, right? So today we have guests, Seth V from the community, who many of you latch on to answer all your technical problems so that you don't have to answer the technical questions. Seth V is here to answer those. And then Alex Brandes, who is our VP of Engineering, really kind of leads all product, as well as orchestrating the protocol, deployments, productization of the protocol, and the application layer. And then myself, Ben Jorgensen, CEO of Constellation. So today we have a pretty exciting, I think today's exciting Hypergraph hour, because last week was a pretty big release for us as we started the release of our SDK. And really this is, in many ways, the start of more consistent releases, technical releases. And so I thought today would be really good that after we let the community kind of share sentiment, articulate what the SDK is, the value in it, how easy it is to create a Metagraph token, that we would ultimately come out and review a lot of the questions and actually show a demo on the currency framework, how to set it up, and also go through our technical roadmap over the next few months. So without further ado, I'm going to let Alex kind of walk through the presentation. He's going to walk through the demo, and he's going to walk through the roadmap. And then after Alex is done, Seth V is going to do a little Q&A with Alex from some questions that have kind of spun up over the community, and just questions that he has off the top of his head that I think will kind of give everybody a good level set on where we're going. So Alex, without further ado.
All right, thanks, Ben. Yeah, let's get into it. Well, yeah, I'm really excited to be here presenting this for everybody today. We launched the Euclid SDK last week, and this is a great time to be able to go through and show a live demo and show some of the features that we have as part of it. So today we're going to kind of go through what the SDK is, what problems it's solving, and then dive into a live demo where we're going to show how quick it is to send your first Metagraph token transaction. And then we got some roadmap and feature release stuff for everybody. So here we go. So I think the first thing I want to do is do a little bit of an architecture recap so that everybody's on the same page with this. I think if you've been part of the community and following Constellation for a while, a lot of this will already make sense to you, but it's good to sort of set a baseline here, and then we can expand on it later. So first here we have the DAG L1 network, and so the DAG L1 network is accepting DAG transactions, validating them, grouping them into blocks, and then sending those blocks to the global L0 network or Hypergraph to be included in a global snapshot. And so one of the cool things about the DAG L1 network is its ability to run consensus in parallel, and so you're going to get a lot of parallel processing of those transactions, multiple blocks being created at once and being included into a single global snapshot. So this is the network that everyone has been familiar with. This up until essentially our release last week. This is the entire network, and then so we introduce metagraphs into the picture here. So this is showing specifically, I should say, a currency metagraph. There are other ways that kind of a general purpose metagraph can be constructed, but this is showing the architecture of a currency metagraph created with the currency framework. And so you can see that it's fairly similar with the DAG L1. It has an L1 network that essentially plays the same role. So it's going to be validating transactions that are sent to it, bundling those into blocks to undergo consensus, and then it's going to send those blocks to the Metagraph L0 network. And that network is going to run additional validation and bundle those blocks into snapshots, Metagraph snapshots, which are then submitted to the global L0 to be included in a global snapshot. So you can kind of see it's the architecture is very similar. We're adding one additional layer of creating these metagraph snapshots, but otherwise very similar architecture. And you're going to get a lot of the same benefits with a metagraph token that you would with DAG because of that architecture.
I think, Alex, just to interrupt, just give you a second and kind of put this in context is, I think this is very different than say, hey, we've got our own currency standard. And in many ways, I kind of decoupled this from like, oh, we're just creating a currency standard like an ERC20 token, but instead we're actually allowing people to really create their own network on top of the global L0. And I think that's its own category in a sense that has a lot more complexity, but has a lot more flexibility at the core of what we're doing, which is very different than just creating another token framework for people to use and fundraise or something like that, but actually design their own network with their own business logic.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You're building your own layer one network with your own custom functionality when you're doing this here,
like your own Ethereum, if you wanted to.
And so then just to kind of expand on the structure we're just looking at here, metagraphs are essentially microservices. So you've got a multi-layered architecture with each layer having a specific domain of responsibility and connections between those layers with specific API contracts for communication. And so that structure is the basis for a lot of the scalability of the network, why we can handle a lot of throughput. But also, development on microservice style architectures can be challenging. I think that's pretty well known in the developer community. When you just have a lot of moving pieces, you have a lot of services that you need to set up and configure. And so that's one of the things that we really wanted to focus on and simplify for this SDK. So if you look on the right here, you can see our minimal development environment. And what I mean by that is that this is the minimum number of services that you would need to get running and configured in order to have a local version of the network that's running and fully functional. So you can see there's a few items there. So we've got 3 Metagraph L1 nodes are required, 1 Metagraph L0 node, 1 global L0 node, and then optionally, if you also want to run the DAG L1 network, you would need 3 additional nodes. And so that's not strictly required for Metagraph development, but for many projects, you would want to also be running the DAG L1. So that adds up to between 5 and 8 nodes that you're going to need to have running and configured. And if that sounds scary, it's not, because that's the problem that we've solved for you with the Euclid SDK. So the Euclid provides Metagraph tooling that simplifies the process of local development, managing your clusters using Docker and some of the included tooling that we have, and then eventual deployment of those clusters. So it comes with a few different pieces that'll work together. The first is the Euclid development environment. So this is a pre-configured base project for Euclid development. You can kind of think of this as a home-based project that's going to support all of the cluster configuration and Docker config, and then work with our framework system so that you can install sort of pre-built template projects and pre-built functionality, and then develop starting from that functional starting point. It also comes with the Hydra CLI, which is a CLI tool for building project clusters, managing your Docker containers. So this is going to allow you to build all of the required nodes, bring them up, take them down, and then that tool is also used for facilitating upgrades. So you can upgrade your development environment and gain access to new features that weren't available when you first started. It also comes with the developer dashboard, which is a front-end code base, essentially a website that you can run locally that allows you to interact with your development clusters, so you can see all of your networks and what their status is. You can see snapshots, both global snapshots and Metagraph snapshots as they're created, and interact with transactions and see those come through as they're created. And the final item we have here is the telemetry dashboard. So this is tooling for monitoring either your local or deployed Metagraph networks. It's built on top of the Fauna with a Prometheus instance providing the metrics, and it's an extension of the monitoring system that the core team uses for mainnet and testnet, and so it provides a lot of information about the status of the network, health, if there's something going wrong or if everything's okay. So we should talk a little bit about this concept of frameworks. What is a framework? A lot of different definitions for that term. In this case, we're talking about extensible micro frameworks that come with out-of-the-box functionality and support Metagraph development. So the idea here is that you've got specific template projects that are created with out-of-the-box functionality for some use case. So the first one that we've released as part of the package last week is the currency framework. So that comes fully configured so that you can launch your own Metagraph token with minimal configuration or coding required. So if you want a token with the same functionality as DAG without significant modifications, you can really do that without coding. And so we'll see that in a minute here. Frameworks are also upgradable through Hydra CLI, so you can install the latest version and get those newer features as the releases come out. And then everything is integrated with the developer and telemetry dashboards, so everything works together well. So yeah, I should say one of the primary, or one of the big focuses that we had as we were developing this is thinking about how we would provide a quick start framework or quick start guide. And you've seen some other networks, sort of blockchain builder SDKs, mostly specifically with blockchain architecture, are able to provide some of these really good startup experiences where you just download some code or clone a repo, install some dependencies, and then all of a sudden you've got a fully functioning blockchain and you can start interacting with it. So we were really inspired by some of those other frameworks. Our infrastructure is a little bit more complex than we just went through, but that's also what we wanted to provide as well. Just and the idea behind that is that we want to make it really easy for developers in general to interact with these tools, but also new developers entering the ecosystem. If it takes too long, it's too difficult to set up, people are just going to abandon it and move on. And so we wanted to make that process as easy as possible. So this is the time we'll switch over to a live demo that I'll do for you guys. So purpose of this demo is just to show the kind of simple steps that are required to download the Euclid development environment, install the currency framework, and then start sending our first Metagraph token transactions. So it's really quite easy, and so let's get into it. So I think one thing to note is we're essentially following the first two guides within the SDK section of the docs. So if you want to replicate this later, check out those two guides, and it should be smooth sailing to get everything set up for yourself. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to clone the development environment repo. So I will do that here. Okay, great. So we're in. And the next thing we need to do is just, there's two environment variables that we want to configure. And they're in this .env file. I'm going to bring that up. So the first one is a GitHub token. This is a free token that you can get from your GitHub account, just access token. It allows us to use GitHub Package Manager to download packages automatically. And then the second item here is going to be just naming the project and the project name environment variable. So just those two, we'll save that. And so the next thing we want to do is install the currency framework. So we'll use the Hydra CLI for that. So that comes included as part of this development environment. And we'll just run the install command. Since we only have the currency framework released right now, this is going to just use that as default. In the future, this system would allow you to choose which framework you want to install. So great, so we are installed, and I can show you what that means for us. So here's our the directory structure that we're in right now. Within the source directory, you'll see a project directory, and then the directory that we created based on our project name. So we did live demo, it's here. And then inside modules, you've got an L0 and an L1 directory. And those contain our entry points to the L0 and L1 apps that will be built, built as part of the deployment with Hydra. So each of these has a run function that exposes a whole bunch of functionality. So this is what we mean by the fact that you can get in here and extend this, you kind of add whatever you want to it. There's a bit of kind of technical complexity to doing that. You also don't have to change anything, and so that's what we're going to do, is we're going to change nothing here, and move on to, actually, one other thing I should point out. So you can create your own P12 files as well. So this is your token identifiers, or sorry, your node identifiers for each of the nodes that you're creating. That'd be important later with deployment. And then you also have access to Genesis files. So Genesis file is just a CSV file that includes a list of addresses and initial balances. And this is how, when you start the network from scratch, some balances exist at some addresses, and you can determine, what those are using this Genesis file. So we come with, or this comes with 3 addresses, all with 10,000 tokens. So we'll just leave that as default for now. And so the next thing that we would do here is run build. And build is going to build all of your Docker containers. It's going to build Constellation and the frameworks from scratch, and then create your full deployment. It takes about 15 minutes, and so we're going to treat this one like a TV cooking show, and we'll kind of pop that in the oven and pull out one that's already done. But it's a one-time build initially, and it takes about 15, maybe 20 minutes, and then the subsequent builds are much faster. So to pop over another tab here, we've got a pre-built. This is what you would see after you run Hydra build and then Hydra start. We get output here to be able to look at the status of the different clusters that we've created. So these are all running on Docker on your local machine. And we can check out, so this would be the cluster info for the global L0 instance we created. So there's just one node in that. And we can check out one of our currency L1 nodes, which should have three nodes in the cluster for our minimal development environment. So we have our network running. The next thing we want to do is set up our developer dashboard. So we're going to also install that from scratch. Jumping down to the next guide here, the send transaction guide. again, we're going to clone this Git repo for the developer dashboard. All right, and we're just jump into that directory. And then this is it's a Next.js project. It's pretty standard TypeScript front-end framework. And so, if you want to take this project and extend it to add your own custom functionality, this is a really good starting point. So we're just here installing all the dependencies using Yarn, which is a JavaScript package manager. You can use npm if you prefer that. And then we're going to run yarn dev is going to start the server for us. All right, so we just copy the URL to our browser, and let's see what we've got. All right, yeah. So take a second to load, and then we've got all our detail here of all the clusters we just spun up. So you can see we've got a global L0 with one node, currency L0 with one node, and then the currency L1 with 3 nodes. You can also see our snapshot ordinal number for the global snapshot, as well as the ordinal number for the Metagraph snapshot or currency snapshot. And then you can also go in here and inspect the actual snapshot data if you'd like. And so if there was a transaction included in it, you'd see it in this blocks section.
Hey, Alex, just to clarify, on the left,
yeah,
that's if you were to decide to deploy the DAG L1 as part of the SDK cluster, or is that kind of like automatically implemented, I guess? Like, is that optional, like to have the DAG L1 cluster or L0 cluster, I guess, in this case?
Yeah, it's optional to run the DAG L1. You're still going to see, like in this case, we're actually not running the DAG L1.
Okay.
You can see the balances, and you see them actually tick up as rewards go out on each snapshot. But if you were to run the DAG L1, then you could be sending DAG transactions to this to the system as well.
I see. Thanks.
Yep. And so you can see here on the balances for the currency L0. These are the same 3 addresses that we saw in the Genesis file with the same balances. And then we have no transactions. So what I want to do here is fix that. We'll send a transaction. So we've bundled with the developer dashboard some scripts that'll help you send transactions. You can send both Metagraph transactions and DAG transactions, and they come pre-configured with. Oops, I guess it's not ready. It comes pre-configured with a seed phrase that's going to line up with the default addresses that you're going to find in the development environment. So, okay, so we just sent a transaction and we see it pop up here. So send a transaction for 99 tokens from one of our addresses to another. We can see it was included in ordinal 68. So we could check that here. And you see that this one has blocks. And if you scroll down, you'll see here's our 99 tokens number. And yeah, so that's essentially it. There's more stuff to show for sure, but just want to do a brief demo. We also have a script for sending bulk transactions. So if you want to send a whole bunch of transactions at once and see what that looks like, you can definitely do that as well. So also we didn't cover the telemetry dashboard, which is also running at this point. So you can check that out when you run it yourself. All right, so yeah, we can kind of shift gears here and start looking at the next feature releases and some road mapping. So we've got a pretty important release coming up for protocol and SDK at the end of April. We're calling April, May here. I know I know people like to screenshot these dates, but likely end of April, possibly early May. And it's going to include support for Metagraph tokens within the Block Explorer API. So it's going to unlock the ability to include Metagraph token transactions in the DAG Explorer and Metagraph tokens in Stargazer. Both of those are going to be on testnet, not on mainnet, but we'll still be able to interact with them through those systems. It's also going to include a feature to support multiple peer signatures on snapshots. This is such a security feature that's going to be important for mainnet release. So that'll be included. And then an extension of the framework that's going to allow you to customize rewards mechanics for your Metagraph tokens. Right now, with the current release, there's no rewards being distributed through with Metagraph tokens. We know that rewards are an important reason for wanting to run a Metagraph token to reward your validator network. And so that's going to be included in that in this upcoming release. And then this last one is what I think most excited about. It's going to support for custom binary data within the currency snapshot. So this is going to be a way to put data. It's actually tooling to put data within the currency snapshot. So we're going to have data on chain. It's going to be data that would be validated within the Metagraph network. And then included into a global snapshot. So this is a first step towards the system that would be in place once we have the ACI and executor layer in place. So this is the first step towards that, and then there'll be an easy upgrade path from Metagraphs that have implemented this system to ones that want to have their custom data types fully validated within the global L0 once the executor layer is available. So really excited for this release. Should kind of add a bunch more functionality to anyone that's getting started with Metagraph token development early.
Do you mind if I ask a few questions on that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So I guess we'll start with the support for custom rewards mechanism. Is that essentially like being able to define like max supply and like minting schedule of the Metagraph token within the Metagraph network, or is that also, well, I guess that's a separate question, and then I'll just go to the next question. But
yeah, exactly. So with the current release, the max supply is fixed based on what's in the Genesis file. So there's no inflationary rewards that are being distributed.
Okay.
With this release, it'll support inflationary rewards, and you'll have full control over the logic by which that happens. And so it would be on each snapshot, you would get to determine how those rewards are distributed, or if you reached max supply and you're no longer distributing rewards, all that logic would live there.
Awesome. Okay. So that would that also tie into like the difference between like having triggers based on event triggered snapshots versus like time based snapshots as an example? Like, would you be able to kind of program that within the Metagraph? So like, let's say it's just let's say there's no transactions occurring, right? And then there's like an empty snapshot that goes into the Metagraph L0, and then the nodes in that basically the nodes in L1 validated them and then created a snapshot and pushed it into the Metagraph's L0, but there wasn't any actual like transactions to
right. It's like sort of the way the DAG works with the time transactions that determine rewards.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be customizable through this system.
Awesome. Okay. And I guess support for custom binary data. That's awesome. Yeah, I guess you'll probably get to some of the roadmap items that will contextualize that. So I'll actually just not ask any more questions until then.
Cool. Well, yeah, feel free to jump in with if
Okay.
any of these pop up again. So I wanted to deliver a roadmap for Metagraph token release. And so we're already partway through this roadmap. We opened beta signups last Thursday on March 30th. And so if once you've worked with the framework and you're ready to launch, you can fill out that form and we'll start selecting the first few projects to be on testnet in mid-April, so probably as early as next week. And so this, we're just rolling out slowly onto testnet in order to make sure that everything's stable and the whole process is smooth. And so we'll slowly kind of open up the group that can be part of that throughout the month of April. So end of April, we have this release that we just went through, which is going to be the final feature set that is needed for us to go into security review. Security review is going to look at the currency framework and metagraphs on the network. And so in terms of timing on that, there's some uncertainty. So we're kind of at the mercy of how long that takes. The ideal plan would be to finish that process by June, and then that would be when we would potentially be able to launch tokens on mainnet. So got a asterisk there, depending on security review. Hoping that process goes smoothly, which we expect it will.
Is that security review related to both the DAG mainnet and the metagraphs, the specific metagraphs, or is it just related to DAG mainnet?
So the DAG mainnet underwent security review as part of the mainnet 2.0 launch, and so the plan is to use the same security firm and have them kind of extend their review into Metagraph tokens and metagraphs on the network.
Got it. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to show this is the previous roadmap that we had displayed. This was I guess December 2022, just a few months ago, and we had some Q1 milestones. Metagraph token standard, I think we're calling it L0 token standard, Rosetta support, which we're calling experimental, and then the currency framework being released. So as of last week, we've checked all those boxes. I know there's some questions around the Rosetta support and what experimental specifically means. The idea there is that the complete Rosetta implementation isn't done. There's a number of endpoints that are required as part of that standard that focus on historical transactions and that allow us to run within a validator node. And so those are still being worked on. But this level of what we're calling experimental support is enough for us to continue our conversations with exchanges and integrations that don't technically need that support. So that's why I've been tracking it as a milestone, and that it lets us kind of unlocks those conversations that we're hoping to have. So given that previous roadmap, in the meantime, we've I think already announced through Medium this concept of eras, and this is what we want to use going forward for tracking progress of these protocol milestones. And so we've broken those up into named eras. Hercules era, we just finished last week. The Euclid SDK, currency framework, this experimental Rosetta support, and then the tokenomics light paper that was released. So we've now moved into the Gemini era, and at kind of a high level, I'll actually deep dive on this in a second. We're focusing on the ACI and executor layer, which is going to enable custom data validation on the global L0 and unlock a whole bunch of really cool use cases for us. And we're focusing on getting data on chain, so getting custom data in snapshots, and then block prioritization, which is priority and snapshot processing that unlocks some of the items in tokenomics around snapshot fees, how we're determining who pays what in order to get their snapshots processed. And then The next era, Taurus, will unlock pro scoring, allow us to open the network, and concept of node spectrums, which is the kind of concept of allowing validator nodes to process variable workloads based on what kinds of data they're processing, and then be rewarded or I guess be rewarded for that in variable ways also. So giving the ability for nodes with different processing abilities to contribute in different ways and be rewarded for that. So I guess let me jump to the next slide first. So this is zooming in on the Gemini era and giving a little bit more detail on that. But the overall concept here with the era system is that we have a lot of these features have a ton of dependencies. They include like research and development. There's a lot of uncertainty there, and so we really want to be sure that when we're giving the community dates, we're really certain of those dates. And so that's why we, for the short-term dates, we just went through some of the previous slides. But the eras would be more sort of organized by rough timeline and dependency. And we can kind of check those off as we go along. So in the previous area, I think we, it was a little bit shorter. This one will likely be longer, probably 6 months plus, but it won't be waiting for one big release. We're going to have releases throughout that time, and we're going to be able to keep track of it by checking off these features that we have on the board here. So I guess I can go through some of these. We sort of talked about some of these first ones, getting binary data on chain, completing Rosetta, block priority. So the block priority would be handled with a 3-step process. The first release would be a prioritization function that doesn't introduce any sort of fee mechanism. So it would allow prioritization to prevent spam attacks and some various other security-based changes and be a basis for future development. The second release would be a basic fee mechanism. And then the third would be a complete fee mechanism that interacts with the executor layer and the ACI. And so it depends on those kind of longer term features. So the other major feature here is the ACI and executor, which we were just sort of talking about, broken up into three releases as well. First would be an isolated executor implementation. So this is a isolated execution environment that would run on validator nodes. And so solving all the problems around security and stability for those is a big challenge. The second release would be the actual definition of the ACI. So, defining what is the system that metagraphs are defining the data types that they're wanting processed, and those custom validation functions that they're sending to the global 0. And the final stage would be the custom data actually being validated on the global 0 and the whole system running together. So I guess one other item to mention on this is the data framework for the SDK. So just like we have currently the currency framework, we're planning on introducing a data framework that would allow use cases around processing custom data types, potentially without the need for any sort of currency transactions or combined with it. So yeah, I think that covers most of the major items on there. I think that's about the last. We got one more slide of that, but Seth, any questions on this part?
I think, you definitely, this is great. Like, honestly, I love how you broke this down into very granular dependencies, which kind of captures, an era, like, all these different functionalities, right? And the intention to deliver them gradually, like rolling them out, I think is also really cool. Is actually, on that note, would there be scenarios where, let's say, I don't know, let's say there's like a new one of these features, or maybe two of the features, like let's is rolled out incrementally, would there be a chance for developers to have access to like a beta version of that to test out? Like, let's say like the data framework SDK, for example. Is there like any idea there on how that would work? Would it be like something where it would be a beta SDK that's deployed in a local cluster, or is the intention to actually have that as like on testnet, for example, on the public testnet?
Yeah, I think there's different ways it could roll out. In general, those frameworks are depending on features that are having to be included in the Constellation code base and then roll out to testnet. So it may be that they could be kind of front run that move to testnet, but more likely it would happen around the same time. Those features would be deployed to testnet, and then people can start using the framework. It's sort of similar to what we're doing right now with the currency framework. That those features are available on testnet or locally, and then eventually we'll roll it out to mainnet once it's more stable.
Got it. And then the other big thing, which I know you did describe quite well, is the ACI concept of that. I think from like a practical perspective, for those that are just new to Constellation or haven't read the white paper, geeked out like I have over the years, like a more practical example of what the ACI enables, I think is helpful. Like, I mean, this is just kind of like off the top of my head. Like, I know, and basically validate this example. Like, would one example of the ACI would allow for different metagraphs that are submitting snapshots containing both currency snapshots or actual binary data snapshots? Would the ACI essentially allow those metagraphs to register the data types contained in those snapshots in like the global L0, right? So that respective state channels can then use those data snapshots or the transactions contained within them to trigger some sort of logic in their local metagraphs. Is that essentially like what would roll out? So for example, like I'm the void or something, or I'm just gonna throw out GeoJam, and I want to basically be able to incorporate some native data type within the void into my own local consensus on GeoJam's Metagraph, for example. Would that essentially, is that an accurate description?
Well, yeah, to kind of zoom out a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's kind of two parts that are working together, right? You have the ACI, the application chain interface. So this is a way to define for a Metagraph the kinds of data types that they need processed or validated, and describe that to the global L0. And so the other part of that is the executor layer. So this is the actual place that those validations would run, and those would all run on the global L0 network. So you've got the ACI Metagraphs defining the kinds of data they want validated, the executor layer actually running those validations in a secure context. And so the first step is to release those two pieces, and then for a single Metagraph, they're having their data validated by the global L0 layer. What that unlocks beyond that is these kind of dependent interactions. So you could potentially have one Metagraph that submits a data validation transaction that depends on some sort of validation of another transaction from another Metagraph. And so all of a sudden you have these triggers between Metagraphs, these cross-chain type of interactions. So yeah, that's why this feature is really super important. Once we're able to release that, there's going to be a whole bunch of possibilities that are going to be unlocked, which kind of go back to the original concepts and what everyone, a lot of the community has been excited about with the Hypergraph. So
it's like a native oracleization that's just built directly within the network without relying on third-party Oracle networks, essentially.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yep, exactly.
awesome. Sweet. Yeah. I think I don't know if you have another slide. I don't want to dominate this, but there's some questions too that I received on the side that are actually pretty legit but we can get into them if you have another slide you want to get to. Or
Yeah. Just one more, just shout out. We're still hiring for especially engineering and product. We multiple positions open for protocol engineer, full stack engineers, developer advocate, someone to help with outreach and onboard new developers. So if that's you, check out constellationnetwork.io/jobs. But that's basically it. Yeah. final slide.
Sweet. Cool. Awesome, man. Yeah. This was great. I think just a few, they're they're more specific questions related to the way the Metagraph tokens are in the currency framework right now are kind of developed. I'll kind of read this verbatim and just let me know if I need to paraphrase it or something. But quote unquote, I noticed the wallets are DAG addresses. Will Metagraph tokens always have DAG in the beginning of addresses, or would a Metagraph token be able to change that, like change the prefix, I guess, of the tokens within their L1 Metagraph networks?
At least initially they're going to share the same addresses with the rest of the network. I can imagine a super custom implementation that would change that, but they're always going to be tied to DAG addresses in the global L0 associated with their private keys and P12 files.
I see. Okay. Then the second question, it's basically asking if the salt was incorporated into the hash. He asked it at 3:30 or whatever time it was. What time is it now? About 20 minutes ago into your presentation. So I'm not exactly sure which slide you're on, but does that question make sense? Like the salt of the E, I guess.
Not
Right into
total.
the hash.
Maybe an extra technical one. Push that onto Discord or something would be
Cool.
happy
Yeah.
to answer.
And then some questions about requirements around the node validators at each layer, right? You have the Metagraph L1 nodes, you have the L0 Metagraph node, and then you have the actual global L0 node. I think that was outlined in the recent Medium article. But I guess it's worth going over again just to kind of explain some of the prerequisites for the different nodes.
Yeah, sure. I think that makes sense. So the L0 Metagraph nodes are required to be also global L0 nodes, right? So they would need to be known by the global L0 network using their unique identifier. The L1 and above nodes do not, so they can be organized however the Metagraph wants to.
Okay. Let's see, we have a few more minutes. And Ben, I don't know if you wanted to interject or say anything, but because I just have a few more it's just more related to like pro and how that fits into these different layers. Essentially, that was another question I kind of got from the community, but I don't want to, if there's anything you want to say, Ben, before I continue with my questioning.
Yeah, we got like 5-10 minutes left. That's pretty much all I gotta say.
Okay. Got it.
I'm the time cop.
So and this might be something that can't be answered today or not, but the question I got was essentially where and when, I guess, is pro implemented, right? When it does get introduced, right? So for example, based on the tokenomics light paper, it was clear that the L0 Metagraph network node is running the global L0 process and then its own Metagraph L0 process. And then I guess the question is like, would Pro be I guess evaluating that L0 node, and then the next question would be the same for the L1 network itself on the Metagraph. Like, is that something where they would have the option to implement Pro in the L1 network, and just kind of like how would that work conceptually? You don't have to go into super details, but just kind of like conceptual, high level, like how that would.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially the idea is that Pro would be measuring on the global L0 network, so it's just nodes within that network, and the fact that any node on a Metagraph, any L0 node on a Metagraph has to share via sort of essentially a hybrid node with that, means that any Metagraph interacting with the global L0 would be measured through this Pro system. So that's the initial concept. Whether it could be extended later to also run on the Metagraph networks, I don't want to speculate too far in the future. It's certainly possible, but it's a process that's in development now, and so we don't have it on. I should actually say. We don't have it anywhere within the Gemini era, but
Okay.
it is in active development. So we are ramping up development. There just won't be any releases likely in the next few months on Pro, but it is being worked on actively. It's kind of a long process with measuring a lot of different things into machine learning algorithms and experimenting.
For sure. Yeah, I guess the core of the question really was just, and again, in the Taurus, I'm not even talking about Gemini, just like, can you adapt the L1 or the Pro model into whatever layer of your Metagraph, right? That's essentially the question, like almost like as a part of the SDK in a way, right? Like a consensus module that you can then use in your L1 Metagraph. But it's just something to think about if when you break out the Taurus down the line and break out all the dependencies and everything. Just food for thought, really. Don't expect an answer.
Yeah, yeah, definitely potentially possible, but
yeah,
I don't want to speculate too far.
No worries. No worries.
Yeah, it would be definitely an interesting concept if we could.
Yeah. Awesome. I don't think I have any more questions in the no more real questions in the chat that I can find.
I can't see the chat. Is it when Ledger or when Binance?
Yeah, it's along those lines. Yeah.
A note on Ledger. I apologize for how long it's taken. It's taken literal years. We are in their backlog, but we've done everything that we can at this point. So they're choosing to be a little slow about how they onboard new networks, and we're caught up in that, unfortunately. So that's my note on Ledger.
Awesome.
Well, great, guys. Thank you so much for putting that together, Alex, and thanks, Seth, for being here to kind of guide some of the questions. I know it's really valuable for the community to have somebody to reach out to be like, what's this mean? So it always helps to have your face here and be able to kind of absorb it in real time and then take that and disseminate that to the community. Alex, love the presentation. That was beautiful. I think gives people a lot to think about when they're designing their Metagraph, not just their token, but also their business. And I'm excited for this next month too. We have a lot going on, and we already have a lot of demand from different Metagraphs. So it's a good time. So thank you, guys. Hypergraph 49.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, boys.
You guys.
Good job.
Thanks.